They say that difficulties make the man. But in Joseph's situation, it was really the difficulties that revealed the man. You see, Joseph's life, it had a lot of ups and downs, but it had more downs than it had ups. And it was filled with more kind of zigs and zags and curves and turns than it did straight lines. When you see Joseph's beginning, he's starting here, and we see the end of his story being second in command. But the path from here to there is filled with a whole lot of zigs and zags. And in all of it, he demonstrates an ability to respond right. In our Sunday services, we highlighted it this way. It's response-ability. And one of the things we did is we approached the prison narrative of Joseph in prison was to try to identify what it was that gave him the ability to respond right. In the prison narrative, we started with who is Joseph. He's a young man, probably in his 20s, but he's also a young man who's been on the ugly receiving end of other people's choices. So he didn't have any choice in the family that he was born into. He had no choice that he would be the favored son from his father. He didn't have a choice in that he would receive the coat of many colors. He didn't have a choice in who the brothers were that he would have, and that they would throw him into a pit and sell him into slavery. And he had no choice in that he would go work for Potiphar, who has a wicked wife. He didn't have any choices in all of this. He's on the ugly receiving end of other people's choices, and their choices affect him. They rob him of comfort. They rob him of convenience. They, at this time in his life, would have seemed to have robbed him from any kind of positive future. That's who's in this prison narrative. Well, we ask the question, why is he in that prison? And the answer is very simple. He chose not to do the wrong thing. Potiphar's wife, the Bible says, repeatedly, day after day after day, she solicits him, but he repeatedly says no, no, no. But on one particular day, everyone's gone from the house. And on this day, she takes her solicitation. The temptation level rises, and she goes after Joseph. And Joseph, in that moment, chooses not to do the wrong thing, leaves his coat and runs. J. Vernon McGee suggested that old boy Joseph, his clothes are always getting him into trouble. It was the coat of many colors that ended him up in the pit, and now it's his cloak that he left behind that is what she holds up as proof to say that he had attempted to rape her. Potiphar comes home and he believes his wife, and he throws Joseph into prison. Now, I say that he believes his wife. We're not sure to what level he believed her. Most would suggest that he believed something had happened, but it probably wasn't that Joseph had attempted to rape his wife. If he truly believed that, he would have killed Joseph on the spot. But instead, he throws him into the king's prison, the Bible says. And it's in that king's prison that Potiphar still has his eye on Joseph, and most likely is able to make sure that Joseph gets into second place. Second in command there in that prison, serving other prisoners. Here's my suggestion. Here's just kind of my gut thought, and that is that after living with Potiphar's wife for a long time, Potiphar probably came to the conclusion that his wife was a wicked woman. And yes, she didn't get Joseph, but she's probably tried to get other men, and after Joseph is thrown in prison, she probably pursued somebody else. I think Joseph is in the king's prison, in a sense, to appease Potiphar's wife, but for Potiphar to also say, I don't believe you're fully guilty of these things, but I have to keep you in prison to keep her happy. Well, it's in that prison that we see Joseph really responding well. I mean, this isn't like the first time something bad has happened into his life. This is one of many things that have happened in his life, but repeatedly, he has the ability to respond right. So we asked this question this morning. What enables a young man in his 20s to have this kind of ability to respond right? And we started this way. Let's take note of what he doesn't have. He doesn't have this spiritually supportive family at home. They're not praying him through this trial. They're not writing letters exhorting him to hang in there and to keep his faith in God. His brothers and his father actually think him to be dead. So he doesn't have the family support. He doesn't have godly friends. Daniel did. He had Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, but Joseph has no friends that are recorded here that are godly, faithful men. He has an absence of friends. He doesn't have the Bible yet. So in the wee hours of the morning or late at night in his prison cell, he's not turning the pages of the Bible, recording who God is and learning how God would have him to respond. The church hasn't even come into existence. Joseph doesn't have this loving, supportive church family on the outside walls of the prison praying him through like Peter, Paul, and Silas had. There's a whole lot of things that Joseph doesn't have. But the life story of Joseph would record something very, very important that he did have. He had a rich knowledge of God. His knowledge of God is seen in his recognition that God is holy. When Potiphar's wife tempts him, he says, "How can I sin against you and my master and my God?" For him to be with Potiphar's wife was not just a mess up. It wasn't just something that would be a mistake, nor was it something that would just affect another human being. His understanding of who God is and God's holiness is such that Joseph says, I can't sin here. His ability to do right in that moment was tied to his knowledge of God. As you and I go to the end of his life, as he's looking at his brothers, and his brothers, the very ones that started this whole ordeal of throwing him into a pit and then selling him into prison, he looks at those brothers and he says, "Ye meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." His knowledge of God is not just rooted in the holiness of God, it's also rooted in the goodness of God. The goodness of God is the summation of all of His attributes that enables God to make an A+ grade in every single one of them. When it comes to His wisdom, when it comes to His love, when it comes to His mercy, the goodness of God means that in all of those things, He's going to execute them at an A+ level. And Joseph looked at all of the twists, the turns, the ups, the downs of his life, and he says, I can respond right. His ability to respond right was that he believed that God was good. The third thing you see is in the dreams in particular, that whether he was interpreting the dreams of the baker and the butler or the Pharaoh, he's giving God credit. He's recognizing that these dreams are from God, and he's also crediting that what's going to happen in these men's lives, or what's going to happen either in a time of famine or a time of great profit and harvest, that all of those things are at the hand of God. He says, listen, God is sovereign. He's in control of all things, and my ability, he would say, to interpret these dreams isn't even of myself. It's because of the ability, power of God. Joseph knew God, and that rich knowledge of God gave him the ability to respond right. The same thing is true in our lives. You and I experience the twists, the turns, the ups, the downs, and there are weeks when it feels like there are more downs than there are ups. And there are very little straight lines in God's leading in our life. It's a zig and a zag here, and a zag and a zig, and we just throw up our hands and say, I just can't keep up with it. But we can have the ability to respond right in all of it if we, like Joseph, have a rich knowledge of God. So, how do we grow in that? And I want to remind us that that doesn't happen accidentally. Joseph didn't just wake up one morning and, wow, I know God. No, it was the steady, intentional effort on his part to bring what he already knew about God into life's events. When temptation came, he brought the holiness of God to bear. When it came to dreams, he brought the sovereignty of God to bear. When he's looking at the very men who had done him evil, he brought the goodness of God to bear. If you and I are going to grow in this ability, we have to just keep taking off the shelf of our minds that knowledge about God, and we keep applying it to everyday life circumstances. And as we do that, we grow in our ability to respond right. So many of us are reading our Bibles on a consistent basis. In fact, I've identified almost half of our church right now is trying to read through the Bible in the entirety of it over this year. Now, one of the dangers in Bible reading plans is that we read the Bible to check off the box. Sometimes people read the Bible solely because it's really interesting. They love the way it's put together and they want to unpack the kind of the format and the organization of the Bible, and they're intrigued. For sake of words, they're entertained by the way the Bible is put together. But at the end of the day, reading the Bible is not a box I check off, nor is it something that just intrigues me, that causes me to study it. This is a book about God, who He is and what He has said. One man said, you can't round the corner of any page in this book without bumping into God. And I would submit that one of the greatest ways we can grow in our ability to respond right is to voraciously read this book, looking for who God is and what He has said. As you and I keep on this journey of faith, experiencing the twists, the turns, the ups and the downs, let's keep knowing God at the center of everything that we do. I'm praying for you.